In Deltarune, the Titans are presented as the apocalypse incarnate. The prophecy warns of their destructive power, and Rousey defines them as the fear of the dark. At first glance, they seem like simple, gigantic monsters that we must stop, but the game offers clues that are far more literal and stranger. Their behavior in battle, the shape of their shield, and the very words of the prophecy don't describe a monster, but a concept. The truth isn't that the Titans cause fear, it's that they are fear, and they are made of a force we already know very well: determination. Today, we're not just theorizing, we're connecting the dots. We'll analyze how the prophecy literally tells us that the Titans are formed from darkened eyes. We'll see why their shield is shaped like a save point, and how their invincibility in battle is an extreme manifestation of determination. And finally, we'll bring all these pieces together to define what these creatures are exactly, and how, as crazy as it sounds, they connect to Death's holiday and her disappearance. And it all begins with the text that foretold their arrival. Chapter 1: The Prophecy. To begin deciphering the enigma of the Titans, we must first accept what the game presents as a fundamental truth: the prophecy of the Deltarune. We won't tackle all of it, but rather a key part: the roaring. Initially, it only poses the danger of breaking the harmony between light and dark, foretelling a terrible calamity. The sky will run black with terror, and the land will crack with fear. Then, her heart pounding, the earth will draw her final breath. This first prophecy states that the fountain of darkness remains at the center of the kingdom, but the appearance of another dark fountain is what begins to shift the balance between light and dark. The heroes manage to seal this fountain in the first chapter, and we avoid the terrible calamity Rousey warned us about. This led us to believe that dark fountains weren't inherently evil places. They were worlds capable of giving life to hundreds of objects, with their own thoughts and desires. Even Susie and Noelle question if these worlds are better than their own. This inspires Birdley to open a new fountain, but before a Titan can be unleashed, Rousey stops him and tells us about the roaring. When the light is subsumed by shadow, when the fountains fill the sky, all will fall into chaos. The Titans will take form from the fountains and envelop the land in devastation. The surviving Darkners, crushed by the darkness, will slowly, one by one, turn into statues, leaving the Lightners to fend for themselves, lost eternally in an endless night. This prophecy, which not even the Queen knew about, makes them abandon the idea of creating more fountains, and they close the one into Cyberworld. Even so, Chris opens one on their own in their living room. Fortunately, no Titan is created from it, but prophecies come true, and in Chapter 4, we finally witness the roaring for ourselves. Interestingly, the Dark Sanctuaries don't contribute much to this part of the prophecy, but they do mention something interesting: a world basked in purest light. Beneath it grew eternal night. If the fountains freed, the roaring cries, and Titans shape from darkened eyes. The light and dark both burning dire, a countdown to the Earth's expire. As Susie confronts the roaring night, we see it prepare to initiate the roaring, transforming its weapon into 5 swords that it plunges into the ground near the third Dark Sanctuary's fountain. And just like that, a new dark fountain opens, though it's different from the one in the background. It's very similar in size, color, and shape to the dark fountain seen on the chapter select screen, predominantly blue. But as it rises, the light vanishes. Its form dissolves into a chaotic, semi-transparent texture before solidifying into a colossal stone pillar. The pillar cracks and breaks open, revealing several eyes with a vertical line running through them. From one of the cracks, the Titan's arm emerges, a grotesque hand with sharp nails embedded with more of those same eyes. And from the pupil of the largest eye, a blast of pure energy is unleashed. Afterward, the heroes ascend the pillar, which isn't made of stone, but of that same chaotic texture as the Titan, with countless eyes watching Chris's every move. When they reach the top, a pair of wings sprouts from the pillar. A final, gigantic eye materializes above Chris, and they attack it, managing to escape the Titan's line of sight and landing beside Rousey and Susie. As they climb the pillar again, the dark particles consume the entire ground. After a boost from Susie, they manage to reach the very top of the dark world. The path is broken, and all that's visible below is that strange darkness flooding everything. Susie says they'll have to wait for it to appear, but Rousey tells them that's not necessary. The Titan has been there the whole time. Chapter 2: The Titan. The scene darkens completely around the Titan, and a strange silhouette emerges. Some associate it with the face of a man, which shifts to reveal a head covered by multiple wings. These wings part to show a humanoid being with the hole where its face should be, covered by a shield shaped exactly like the game's save point, the very symbol we associate directly with determination in Undertale. This appearance is quite different from the illustrations in the prophecy, which show 3 humanoid silhouettes. The 2 on the sides are identical and seem to have the same form as the Roaring Knight, with the more imposing figure in the middle. That central figure has 3 eyes on its body, similar to those we see on the Chapter 4 Titan, but the big difference is not just its body shape, but its horns, which are completely different. They're more like Asgore Dreamors, which is obviously just a coincidence, right? Furthermore, all 3 figures seem to have a similar shape on their faces, maintaining the save point motif. This has led many to believe that this form is unique to this Titan, and that other Titans may take different forms depending on the dark world they were created in. In the battle, new minions appear, like a red variant with a single eye in the center, another resembling a centipede, an evolved version of the embryo-like spawn, and even a variant with only teeth. If we try to spare the Titan, a line of dialogue states, "It is not something that can understand mercy." Rousey's fears are confirmed. You can't defeat such an entity in battle. No matter how much they attack, they only damage its outer layer. Its determination-shaped shield regenerates no matter how many times it's broken. Just when all hope of stopping it is lost, Gerson appears, cracking the shield in a single blow. However, it doesn't seem to be enough. Susie gets the idea to go inside the Titan, jumping in with Chris. Inside, we see the same chaotic background with particles of darkness on the sides. As Chris and Susie fall, the soul representing the player appears, illuminating the Titan's entire interior and finally sealing the fountain that created it, which, by the way, makes Susie wonder just what Chris's red heart is. It's worth noting that this battle becomes easier with the Dark Shard equipped, as it allows you to deal more damage to Dark-type enemies like the Titans. This is particularly curious considering that up to this point we had never been introduced to a weapon that dealt extra damage to a specific enemy type. With the battle over, things feel strange. The Titan was in essence invincible, capable of regenerating its defense over and over, and different to Mercy and blind to anything but its apocalyptic purpose. And it is precisely in that defense where the true answer to its nature lies. Its shield, with the unmistakable shape of a save point that repeats across all 3 figures in the prophecy, is, as we know from Undertale, the purest manifestation of a force capable of bending reality, of refusing to die. Chapter 3: Determination. Determination is an element that hasn't been explored in depth in Deltarune. In fact, the very first save point appears when Chris and Susie enter the Dark World, and the text that accompanies it is very interesting. At times, you see a flickering, the light only you can see. By second nature, you reach out and this leads to the save interface. It's interesting because besides confirming that only the player or Chris can see the save points, they seem instinctively know how to access it, as if something in their nature already knows what to do. If we go back to Undertale, save points are found throughout the game. They express the protagonist's determination and thoughts on recent events, and are living manifestations of determination. Entry number 5 in the True Lab is a study of this force. I've done it. Using the blueprints, I've extracted it from the human souls. I believe this is what gives their souls the strength to persist after death, the will to keep living, the resolve to change fate. Let's call this power determination. Despite being a natural quality in humans, boss monsters can possess a large amount of determination. If a monster acquires too much of it, they melt away, usually turning to dust shortly after, just as happens to Undyne the Undying. And yes, a being without a soul can gain the will to live if it acquires determination, like Flowey. This is explained in entry number 8 of the True Lab. I've chosen a candidate. I haven't told Asgore yet because I want to surprise him with it. In the center of his garden, there's something special. The first golden flower that grew before all the others. The flower from the outside world. It appeared just before the queen left. I wonder, what happens when something without a soul gains the will to live. The being with the most determination in the underground has the power to change fate and access the game's save load system. Before Frisk's arrival, Flowey had the most determination and could access this power. He initially used it for the good of all, until he got bored and wanted to see what would happen if he did things differently. When I saw you in the ruins, I didn't recognize you. I thought I could frighten you, then steal your soul. I failed. And when I tried to load my save file, it didn't work. Chara, your determination, somehow it's even greater than mine. Determination is also a play on words. Its main power is the ability to reverse death, whether it's the protagonists or those they've killed. Hence the term determination, as Toby Fox explains in the Legends of Localization Book 3, Undertale. However, no one in Deltarune has referred to determination this way. Instead, characters like Queen say, this power of the will, this power of determination. Is this not something that all Lightners possess? If one was simply determined enough, could not anyone make a dark fountain? Now, with this definition in mind, let's look at the Titan again. Remember its behavior. A creature impossible to permanently harm, regenerating its shield over and over. A being that, in essence, refuses to die. Isn't this the perfect description of the strength to persist after death, taken to its absolute extreme? We saw its body emerge from a chaotic, colorless texture, an unstable form that could barely contain itself. This is the same principle that causes monsters to melt, a power so immense that it deforms the physical vessel trying to contain it. We were told it couldn't understand mercy. Just like Flowey, it is not a creature you can reason with. It's a being without a soul that has been infused with a single and overwhelming will to live, or in this case, a will to end everything. A determination that gives it the ability to regenerate, but not the power to load a save. This explains why Gerson cracks the shield with a single blow. For those who want a deep dive, Gerson's tension points is ridiculolously high. If we apply the formula to calculate how much gold the player receives after a battle, Gerson would need a TP bar at 1,752% to yield the 438 dark dollars you get after recruiting him. His tension is so high that it exposes the fragility of the Roaring Knight's determination, a being with enough will to create dark worlds. This leaves us with one last piece of the puzzle. The very definition of the Titan. Rousey poetically describes it as the fear of dark, the bum in the night, the shadow of the backside of your mind. During the battle, the game is even more direct. Titan, the fear of dark, which appears in many forms. It's not a being that causes fear, it is the personification of fear itself. Think about how dark worlds work. When darkness falls, objects become indistinct and can be perceived as something else entirely. It's an illusion, an alternate reality seen through the lens of shadow. But what happens when a fountain is created, not in a classroom, but on top of an existing fountain, as we saw in Chapter 4, something darker, yet darker. In this absolute darkness, where a distorted reality is distorted once more, what primordial concept takes form? Fear. The fear of the unknown, the anxiety of nothingness, the terror of darkness itself. But the key to its very anatomy doesn't require deep interpretation. It's been there all along, written literally right before we face it. If the fountain's freed, the roaring cries, and titans shape from darkened eyes. This isn't a metaphor. The game is telling us, point blank, that the raw material of these abominations, the very substance they are made of, is, Chapter 4, Darkened Eyes. The symbol of an eye with a vertical line through it is intimately linked to the Titans. Even their battle uses a dynamic border filled with these eyes, which glow red whenever the Titan takes damage. Not to mention these same eyes appear on the stone pillar the fountain becomes, literally forming the Titan from their sum. Its body seems to be covered in these eyes, and the symbol even appears in its depiction in the prophecy. That's why it's so peculiar that the first time we encounter this symbol is in the unknown area. It's the first area the player visits and where the first save point is found. Its walls and black fluids are covered in these drawn eyes. There's even a puzzle involving them that says, in this land, only eyes blinded by darkness can see the way, and completely obscuring these symbols opens the path. After an attack from Lancer, we leave this area descending to the cliff west of Hometown. This means that the pure dark fountain or Rousey Reigns has a zone that seems dedicated to the Titans, a zone we curiously cannot return to. However, in Chapter 2, we can find Mr. Society by the cliffside, who admits he's still too afraid to integrate into Castletown society and flies to the top, promising to live there until he has the courage to return. The other place we find these eyes is in the dreamer's own home. Their rug has a pattern that perfectly matches the eyes. This house is known for having several elements from the prophecy, from a Deltarune rug to a painting of a red heart. So the pattern on this rug is no mere coincidence. They are part of the prophecy. This makes the correct question not what these eyes are, but whose they are. Some associate these eyes with the secret boss of the 3rd chapter, and I don't mean the Roaring Knight, but the wielder of the Shadow Mantle, who gives it to you after a battle at the end of the sword route. In that battle, this symbol appears again, making the bean's connection to the eyes clear. In fact, its battle theme is titled Burning Eyes, and most curiously, it is known internally as Nightmare. So if the Titans are the fear of the dark, then whoever this being is, it's the one who uses those fears to torment. It is Nightmare itself made tangible. Theories abound about its true identity, with some linking it to the entity who speaks at the beginning of the game and asks for the player's name. If that were true, the eyes wouldn't be a symbol. They would belong to something or someone. And this is where we must turn to one of the libraries in the Dark Sanctuary, where we can find the following text. And so wept the fallen star, making rivers with its tears. Then slowly, from the bitter water, something grew. It looked like glass. If we add to this the dialogue that appears during the battle with the Roaring Knight, you felt lightheaded, you saw golden stars, and the fact that the fragment of its sword it drops is described as glass, it leads us to consider the possibility that the Roaring Knight was born from the tears of someone trapped in the darkness, someone like Des. Like a star in the deep of night, she sheds a tear and gives shape to a new will. This would explain its strong resemblance to the beings illustrated in the Roaring Prophecy, and it fits with how the Titans are said to be born, from Darkened Eyes. It's possible that those eyes don't belong to a single person, but are consciousnesses that, like Des, the Forgotten Man, or even Gastard himself, ended up trapped in that place that is darker yet darker. In the end, we don't know, and won't know canonically until Deltarune is finished, what force is behind the Titans, nor what their true purpose is, although their nature is closely related to determination. But their connection to the Dark Fountains is undeniable. Castletown, with its pure Dark Fountain, must hide many more secrets, and Rousey, the Prince of Darkness, is clearly holding back truths he fears to reveal, aware of the fragility of a reality that could end with the prophecy. But that's a topic for another time.